This is RedPubPod,
RedPubPod.
a podcast
RedPubPod.
from Redhawk Publications. RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
Welcome to a podcast for readers about writers. This is RedPubPod. I'm Richard Eller, and joining me today as co-host is our editor-in-chief, Robert Canipe.
Hello there, everybody out there in podcast land. This is RedPubPod.
And our guest for today has written an incredible book that we are now getting out to the public called In the Shadow of the Clock, The History of the Square, Statesville, North Carolina, 1790 to 1990. It's Mr. Steve Hill. Welcome.
That's
Thank
Dr.
you.
Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Hill.
Dr. Steve.
It is actually Steve.
Oh,
Just
okay.
plain
just
old
Steve.
Steve.
Okay.
All right, we're getting informal today. Well, Steve, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And tell me about how this book happened, because it is an incredible study of downtown Statesville.
Wow, thanks. I have been a lover of history all my life, and I was fortunate to have had parents and grandparents who passed along family stories and tales as I was growing up. I was also fortunate to have elementary and high school teachers in the public school system of North Carolina who were able to sprinkle healthy doses of local history into the North Carolina history curriculum and even the U.S. history curriculum. That had an early impact on me. The community college system, if it weren't for the community college system, I probably would have not gone to college. I was first in the family to go to college. I went to Mitchell Community College. Actually, the first year it was Mitchell Private College, and met up with some fascinating historians there. I don't know if you guys would remember Oscar Stradley. He was quite an outstanding professor of history at Mitchell, as well as Lewis Brown, Steve Herman, Colonel Joseph Pickett, and they really stoked the fire within me to continue working on research, local history research. I'm a firm believer that local history is really important, and it takes a lot of local history to make up the big history picture. So this book is one of those small puzzle pieces in our country's larger puzzle. I've always been a collector over the years. Started collecting when I was a kid, rocks in the backyard, postage stamps. I'd go to the mailbox and pull postage stamps off the letters, and then I got tired of that and collected pennies, Lincoln pennies, trying to get a penny for every date. And that kind of expanded into paper collectibles, postcards, advertising pieces, photographs. And by the time I got my driver's license and was able to get out and hit the flea markets and the yard sales and the estate sales, I was off and running. So anything related to my hometown, my home county, I tried to latch on to. Over the years, it kind of, I guess, got out of hand, and it grew into what is now called the Statesville Historical Collection. I'd invite anybody passing through Statesville to stop by the storefront in downtown Statesville and look at the collection. I don't call it a museum. It's not a museum because museum has a place for everything. Everything's labeled and everything is so formal. This is a real informal collection of memorabilia, everything from signs to, oh gosh, you name it. Lots of photographs, thousands of photographs. So, and it's, even though, as Robert said, it focuses on a small part of the world, Statesville, North Carolina. Most people who come in are able to find at least something that they can associate with. They can look at the old automobile section and look at the old cars and the car dealerships and the neon signs and the old. They can look at the diners. They can look at the movie theaters and what's showing on the movies. And I think it can help just about anybody who is over 50 years old or so, 40 or 50 years old, reminisce about the way things used to be in their hometown, whether it was in New York or wherever. And for the younger kids, it allows them to see some things that they missed out on, and I think that's important too. So when kids come, I do a lot of school groups, and when kids come through, a couple of things I tell them: everybody needs to be a collector. So find something you like to collect, because it teaches you so many skills, everything from organization. But the biggest thing it teaches you is how to research and how to do history. And every kid needs to do that.
I absolutely agree about the collecting thing, because being a collector myself I've got a house full of books and comic books and this kind of stuff. It kind of does teach you those skills. But also, too, it kind of helps you mark the passing of time, in the nostalgia of looking at old advertisements and looking at, old photographs of cars. You've got a photograph in the book of an old bus that is on page 120, Statesville Motor Coach Company. Yeah. And it's a GMC. And it just, it's one of those flat-nosed buses, what we used to call them. And, it lets me take a look at something that I swear when I was a kid I saw, but I really didn't take much note of. But now it kind of tickles something in my memory, when I see it. And the book is just chock full of these kind of photographs of times gone by, that you wake up one day and you're, 60 years old, and you've got this collection of stuff that marks that passage of time. So collecting can also do that.
Yeah, I think it's a form of research, because when you're collecting something and you see it, you think, well, how did this fit into society in general, or what was its purpose? And you begin, it piques your interest, and you begin researching from there, which is an absolutely essential skill to have.
It is.
Yeah. In terms of the pictures, how you just over the years got this set of pictures and that one? I mean, how did that work?
Yeah, we're fortunate there in Iredell County to have had 3 or 4 successful photographers, professional photographers, from the 1890s on up until the 1960s. And somehow or another, by the grace of God, most of their work has been preserved, or at least has been saved. And boxes of negatives are available. Probably if you include all the portraits and studio photographs, probably 500,000 negatives and photographs that still haven't seen the light of day.
Wow.
So there's a lot of material there. What I've done is I've gone through and I've tried to pull out things that interest me, not necessarily people, not that people aren't important, but the street scenes, the church groups, the school gatherings, and things of the nostalgic type of work. Those are the things I'm most interested in. Business history, I'm really interested in business history. So I've tried to pull those out, and I'm a regular customer at Walgreens for their 50% off coupon. Put in a plug for Walgreens. 50% off coupon days, you can get a 8x10. When I first started, it would cost me to have someone take a 8x10 to a dark room and do all of the magic and make me a copy of it. It would cost me $5 to $8, even back in the 80s. But now you can go to CVS or Walgreens and have one done in an hour for a couple bucks or so.
So technology helps that.
It really has.
Yeah, you can buy flatbed scanners now to take to your home that you can put the negatives in and scan the negative, and Photoshop software like that will reverse it and give you a digital version of the photograph.
Yep, that's exactly right. One day, not too awful long ago, a guy brought in a cardboard box with, it looked like window panes, in like 8x10 window panes, and you could hold them up to the light and you can see some things on there. So, like you say, Robert,
old glass,
put those on the
glass negatives. Yeah.
Put those on your scanner and switch it to negative mode, and boom, the quality is equal to anything you could take today on your cell phone.
We were very fortunate when we were working on the Hickory 150th anniversary book that we got some glass negatives.
Yeah.
And we're able to utilize that same thing. And there, what was the hotel that burned? That's one of the first glass negatives we got.
The Hickory Inn, yeah.
Yeah, and those are, I love when those come up on your screen and you're able to see, what's on that glass negative. So this area of Statesville that you're covering, you told me that it's about 2 acres.
Probably 2 acres. It's like you think about a square, a typical square in a town. When Statesville was laid out, the streets were, the 2 main streets were 100 feet wide. And
it's a pretty big thoroughfare.
That's a pretty big thoroughfare for that time. Someone said that that's the minimum it would take to turn a horse and wagon around in the middle of the street without doing a 3-point turn, which makes sense.
But and a 3-point turn would be kind of tough for a horse.
It would be back up.
Yeah.
Back up, Jack.
This horse don't go in reverse, does it?
And but probably
he goes in reverse. You just don't want to be back there when he does.
Yeah, that's a tricky horse if it does.
But the square, I mean the county courthouse stood in the center of the square, so there had to be enough room to build the courthouse and then have enough room to get around it with a horse and wagon. So it's probably more about the courthouse than it was turning a horse and wagon around. But so the square would be 100 feet wide on each side, and the buildings maybe 40 or 50 feet apiece. So probably a couple acres we're talking about. So it's not a real big patch of real estate, but it's an important part of Iredell County. Of course, Statesville is the county seat of Iredell, and dating back to 1789, the streets were actually laid out in 1790. That's how I came up with the 1790 to 1990. I stopped at 1990 because when you get beyond that, I guess there's too many people who know what happened, and
too many opinions.
That's right. It's kind of like when I first started collecting. I didn't collect anything beyond the year I was born. So I wanted everything before 1954. And as I got older, I said, well, these 60s things are pretty cool. So I would collect 1960s things. Now I'm up to the 1990s in the collection, and I guess someday it'll keep on going if I keep on going.
Yeah, there was a time that I used to think 1990 was just 10 years ago.
Yeah, really.
Now...
Well, when you're in the present, you don't think about how fleeting some of that stuff is, that you'll never see some of these scenes again. Yeah. But then when you get 10, 20, 30 years beyond it, you go, wow, the 1980s was an interesting time that we don't see much of anymore.
My God, those clothes they wore in the 1970s.
Yeah. Well, and everything comes back again.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm holding on to my bell-bottom blue jeans.
But so
I got
much
a leisure suit somewhere.
Oh, gee. So much happened in that little square, especially about the civic life, but just people in general in Statesville,
yeah,
right?
It was the center of social activity, business activity, political activity. It was, in the early days, it was where political parties posted their colors. They posted the flag for the president they were supporting, and it would stay up for a while, then somebody else would put up their candidate. It was being the courthouse. It's where a lot of property was sold on the courthouse steps for people who didn't or couldn't pay their taxes. And unfortunately, it's a place where a lot of slaves were sold on the courthouse steps as well. When I do my walking tour with groups, I talk a little bit about that, but I tell people that the salt of many tears lies underneath the pavement that we're standing on from the slaves that were sold, sometimes individually, sometimes as entire families. So that kind of activity took place there. It was the place where the street preachers went. They could always find a crowd. It was the place where the snake oil salesman would set up their table and make a few sales before skedaddling out of town.
It's a place where Tom Dooley got tried. I mean, with the courthouse there. I mean, all that commotion that went along with that.
Yeah, actually, he was like, oh gosh, maybe 50 feet. The jail was 50 or maybe 75 feet from the square where he was held for 2 years during his trial. He was convicted once and he appealed, and he was convicted a second time, but it took 2 years to do all that with the most beloved lawyer in the state, Governor Zebulon Vance. But Zebulon Vance couldn't get him off. So, so he was right there on the square. And then one morning, I think it was May 1st, 1868, they loaded him up, made a rare left turn on the square, which was forbidden for many years. You couldn't make a left turn on the square, but I guess if you're hauling Tom Dooley to the gallows, that was okay.
A guy who turned out to be a folk hero in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and the rest of that is history, of course.
Hang down your head.
Right, yeah.
And cry. And if the Kingston Trio, a bunch of singers out in Hollywood hadn't picked up that song, we wouldn't even know who he was, most likely.
Yeah, he'd be a real footnote, you know. But it's one, you've got a whole section in your center downtown that's devoted not only to what happened, but the fame of it, thanks to the Kingston Trio and all that stuff afterwards.
Yeah, the movie starring Michael Landon as Tom Dooley.
Yeah.
And all the theaters across the world that movie showed, from just South Africa, Iceland, of course, all the European countries were fascinated by it. But yeah.
What's the story of the clock? When did it show up, and how long's it been there? Because it's a real icon. In Statesville.
Yeah. When people think of downtown Statesville, that's probably the one thing that comes to mind is the old town clock, and we're fortunate to still have ours. I can't remember. Does Hickory have? Is their clock working? Do they have a clock there?
They have one in front of Beisner's that used to be more centrally located, but it's still on Union Square. But it's still there, yeah.
And wasn't it like owned by one of the jeweler businesses down there, Dietz and Taylor or something like that?
Well, it was Beisner's Jewelers.
Oh, it was Beisner's that had it. Okay.
And George Beisner was one of the old-time, early residents who wrote a lot about it, so he was like a big name in town.
Yeah. The Statesville town clock dates back to about 1891. The First National Bank built the bank building there on the corner, and they put a big tower on the top of it. And someone said that would be a great place for a clock. Now you got to remember, this is in the county where there's still a lot of frugal Scots-Irish blood and a lot of farmers. And the farmers said, no, we're not paying taxes to put a clock for everybody to use. Heck, that would be crazy. So they were.
We've got to have everybody buy their own watch.
Or charge them to look at it
and
or something.
then we've got to sell them a chain to put on their watch. And
that's what they said. That would put every clock salesman and watch salesman in town out of business. And what would it do for our economy? So all these farmers unions started protesting all the way from Yadkin, Wilkes County, all the way down to Mecklenburg County, and they had these meetings, and it was crazy. The amount of opposition there was to something as simple as I think it cost a couple $100, $300 or $400. It wasn't a big deal, but the city leaders decided to go forward, or the county commissioners actually decided to go forward with it, and we have the clock. It hasn't worked in a long time. It keeps fairly regular time, but the chime has not worked in many years, and that's something I would like to see changed. Maybe an electronic system, chiming system to go with it. I'm hoping that we can do that someday, because you go to places like Newbern, and man, you're walking around those historic buildings in Newbern, and you hear that clock chime, and it kind of gives you cold chills. It
takes you back.
It does. It takes you back.
That's crazy about the farmers not wanting it, wanting it there. But every town's got its controversies like that.
And we still have those same farmers in our county.
They're like 200 years old, but they're still there.
And still frugal.
Still frugal, and who protest just about everything that comes along that costs taxpayer money.
Yeah, now the county courthouse is kind of out of the range of the square, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's important too, because architecturally, it was quite a feat when it was built.
Yeah. In 1854, the city suffered a major catastrophe. Fire burned down about half the town, including the courthouse. So the courthouse was moved off the square, moved down about a block, or I guess a half a block south, and a new building was built. And it lasted. It was rather small, and it lasted up until about 1899, 98, 99. And then the current, what we call the old courthouse, was built.
Bricks made on site and all that.
Yeah, and it was kind of a, if you look at, what's the county down, Albemarle.
Oh.
But their courthouse is almost identical. So the federal government had, I guess, a common blueprint that they built these types of buildings.
Well, the ones still around tend to take on that kind of turn of the century sort of look, that you still see. Yeah. How would you characterize downtown Statesville these days? It seems to be still pretty vibrant.
Yeah, we suffered a lot during the 1980s and 90s. Like a lot of small towns, the main shopping area moved to the outskirts of town with the shopping malls and the strip malls and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you had a mall down there off, was it Broad Street?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and it was like the late 60s, early 70s when that area really started developing out there, and it left downtown Statesville behind. We lost J.C. Penney, we lost Belk, we lost Woolworth, Spain Hours, and some of the larger national chains. They all moved out to what we now call the small mall, but it was the mall, Signal Hill Mall, and it was a great place to shop. But it really changed the landscape of downtown. For many years, we had lots of empty buildings. But on the upside, it did allow small-time businesses to move into some of those places, and small family businesses moved in, and they thrived. But the big guys, if you wanted to go to Belk, you had to go to the mall or to Hickory Mall. A lot of people in Statesville, was it Hickory Mall out on 64 on the west side of town? Was that
Yeah, Catawba Mall.
Catawba Mall, yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
contemporary with Signal Hill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then, of course, Valley Hills after that. But
And now the pendulum has swung the other way, and
yeah.
downtowns are becoming more vibrant.
And look at Hickory, man. During COVID, I would go up downtown. I'd choose a different town every week during the lockdown when you couldn't be around people, and I would just go and just out in the open air and just walk around town. And a couple of times Hickory came back around, so I was able to do Hickory and Newton, all the surrounding towns. But that was an interesting thing to do.
When we first got our driver's licenses in the late 1970s, we used to go to Statesville all the time to go to Signal Hill Mall. It was just
really?
a different place to go. And then years after that, JR's tobacco became a place for us to go and get cigars and used books and remainder books. And there was a used paperback store in downtown called Mary Mac's Used Paperbacks that we used to go hit that place up too. So we spent a lot of time when we were younger going to Statesville. There was a horror film down there that Phyllis Diller was in.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Called Boneyard.
Yeah, that's it.
And it was a real loser, but it was filmed in the old abandoned Davis Hospital. Actually, Statesville was kind of a hotbed in the late 1980s and early 1990s. There was some kind of labor dispute out in California, so they farmed out a lot of the B-level or lower-level made-for-TV movies to North Carolina, and Statesville was able to get in on some of those. But we got to see some big names like Phyllis Diller and George C. Scott and Martin Sheen and Lori Loughlin. And actually, the first movie we got was called A Stoning in Fulham County. And it was about the Amish people up in Pennsylvania, but it was filmed in northern Iredell County with a lot of farms, and they brought in the Amish buggies and that kind of thing. But one of the actors in that movie was a young Brad Pitt.
Oh.
It was Brad Pitt's first credited movie role. He had been an extra in some movies, but had never really had his name attached to a movie. At that time, had been on TV, so everybody knew his name and knew who he was, and that kind of thing. But old Brad Pitt has roamed the square of Statesville.
And you've got some memorabilia
Yeah.
in your center that talks about some of these movies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you cover about everything in there.
Just a little bit of everything, anything.
And that reminds me, for those of you out there listening, this is a kind of focused edition of RedPubPod. We're talking about a local town just a few minutes, what is it, west or east? East of
Hickory.
Of Hickory. The book is located, or you can get the book from Steve at his center. He will have it for sale there. It's about 300 pages. It's $40. You can also get it at RedhawkPublications.com. We've got them in stock and we're shipping daily. Are you going to have any special events or anything like that for your book?
Yeah, we're going to have kind of I guess you'd call it a book signing. I've never signed books before, but it seems kind of foreign. But
Hey, it's better than signing checks.
I guess so. And I turned my phone off for this, for the podcast, so I can't look at my calendar, but it is a Thursday night later in July, toward the end of the month. And we'll have some wine and cheese. We'll have the famous Clay Lunsford there playing his guitar with a little mood music. And just a fun time to celebrate and meet friends and talk and sell a book or two.
We'll have more specific information on that on our website at redhawkpublications.com, and we'll also have it on our Facebook page for Redhawk Publications. I wanted to talk about Casey Jones, keeper of the law and order around the square. This is one of the things that is kind of lost on folks nowadays, that every downtown kind of had a beat cop, a police officer that was, you'd see a lot. And I really love this picture you've got here. It's from your collection of Officer James Howard Casey Jones. Did you ever get to know him, or did you ever get to meet him?
I did. Casey Jones was a legend, especially for every kid. He would guard the square and make sure it didn't go anywhere during the day, and he would slip away long enough to serve as a crossing guard at a nearby elementary school. So the kids loved Casey. I loved Casey. I did not attend city schools, but I knew him when I would go with my mother shopping on Saturday mornings. We always met up with Casey, and he always gave me a stick of juicy fruit chewing gum. And
there wasn't anything better than juicy fruit.
For a kid, and I still have the feelings to prove it.
Yeah, there's no gum that will trigger your swallow reflex better than juicy fruit. I mean,
but Casey, he was more of he was more of a PR man. He didn't have a car. I guess if somebody broke the law, he would blow his whistle or something. But as far as compared to law enforcement officers today, he was more of a goodwill ambassador, I guess, for the city, and always welcoming visitors and being pleasant. During the day, he would run the school kids out of the pool hall who were playing hooky and that kind of thing. So he was quite a man, quite a character. I wish we had a Casey Jones on our town squares now. I think it would be good.
And you've got like his snub-nosed 38 and his badge at your center on display, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some wonderful pictures in here around page 137, 138 in the book, where you can get to know Casey. And because Steve has put this in order according to linearity from 1790 to 1990, and every page is chock full of text and photographs.
Yeah, lots of photographs.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. And it's printed in color. So where the photographs are in color, they are presented in color. And
sometimes
it's
you
just
wouldn't
a great
think that.
job.
I mean, you've got this one, look at 154, more or less a current shot. I guess it's 1990 or so with the kind of cars. But there's also color shots that go back to, that looks like an early 50s automobile.
Yeah, we had one photographer who must have sprung for a roll of color film in 1954. And I don't know when color film came out, but it couldn't have been too long before that. But because there's like 16 color photographs in his collection, and that was about it. But the ones he took, though, are really good photographs.
And I noticed in your layout that you maintained, sepia tones and things like that on photographs where they were available. Yeah. So it's got a really, really nice presentation of antiquity to it. But the photographs reproduced very, very well in the printing.
They did, and thank you for that, because your work, your staff has been so great to work with, and this book, I've never published a book before. Heck, I just sat down during COVID and collected some photographs and some notes and started writing, and you guys have been so helpful. Robert is the master punctuation guy. That it'd been 60 years since I'd studied punctuation, and but he was able to salvage the project.
Yeah, but you had all the hard stuff done. So this is one of those things where the collaboration is lopsided, because you had most of it done, and it was just a few tweaks here and there, but to get things where they needed to be and how they needed to be. And we look forward to doing another volume of 1790 through 2010 or something like that in the future.
maybe someone to step forward and do that.
Well,
other than me.
No. The vast majority of your pictures aren't posted. I mean, you got a lot in here, probably 400 we at one time?
Yeah, I think probably so.
But you still got so many more that tell a whole lot of other stories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I do a program for a civic group, one of my programs is every photo has a story. The old timers who come to my place every day, and we sit around the table and we talk history, and we will take a photograph or a topic for the day, and we will research it, and we will try to look at that photograph and tell as many things about it as we can. If it's somebody that we think someone may know, we'll contact that person and try to get some information. If it's an event, we'll go through the newspapers and try to find out what was going on at the time. But we try to capture the what's going on in just about every photograph, and I think that's important to do. And please, those of you listening, I hope you'll go to your family scrapbook, and you will go and you will turn every photograph over and write everything you know about that photograph down while you can, because
Absolutely.
If you wait till tomorrow, it won't happen. And don't put grandma.
Write her name.
Give her a name, yeah.
100 years from now.
Whose grandma are we talking about?
That's right. They may not know Granny.
Well, Statesville's really a crossroads town. I mean, you got two interstates that go there now, and it always has been, right?
Yeah, it has been. Yeah, back in the early days, anybody traveling pretty much from the eastern area, Wilmington, Edenton, down that way, heading out to the Indian lands, they would have to come through there. And same is true north and south. We've got 77 going north and south, and we're just fortunate that they crossed right there in the dadgum center of the county.
Yeah, pretty much by design, but you also had the railroad come through there. I mean, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So, you have stories of Charlotte broadcast coming up there to be a part of that. I mean, so many different things happen there.
Yeah. Well, don't let the word history in the title of the book scare you, for those who don't like history, because I'm definitely not a historian. And it's written not on a textbook level, but more on a conversational level. That's the only way I know to write.
And something else about this book that is really interesting. If you are a budding writer out there, and you're working on a novel, and you're working on short stories, and you want a place that you can put forth an atmosphere or a sense of place in your writing, a book like this is a marvelous repository for that. Because first of all, it spans 200 years. Second of all, you've got hundreds of pictures that you can use as description, wherever you've placed your story or wherever you've placed your novel. Statesville is kind of like an every town. I mean, those of you out there listening right now, whether you're in North Carolina or you're in one of the other states in the United States, you've been to a town just like Statesville, Hickory, Newton. These towns, they all have the same kind of feelings and the same kind of thing. So this book is an excellent research material for, creating art based on what it gives you. So,
Yeah, it's a starter in a lot of ways, because you could take any person that comes up here, and especially if there's an image that tells you a lot about them, start to imagine, now, what was life like for this person? Where's the fire dog? I come across that at one time. Even if you wanted to talk about the animals, there's plenty that went on there that you could use.
And then we didn't even talk about the greased pole
The greased
contest.
pole, yeah. Stick a $1 bill or a $5 bill or a silver dollar on top of a telephone pole, cover it with chicken grease, and
you've got a public event.
let the guy. Yeah, you got a party.
You could tell there weren't any video games back then. So,
Well, that's what a lot of people talk about in those old days. You made your own fun. And,
Yeah, it had to.
And Statesville isn't every town, but it's kind of more than that, because most towns don't have this kind of repository.
oh, that's definitely a positive.
Yeah.
That you have given your time and your expertise to put something like this together in your center.
Well, hopefully it will be valuable to city planners, event planners who might be looking for some interesting and fun things to do to create interest in their areas. Talk about the grease pole, the parades, and every parade had a theme or a scheme, and we had some really good schemers and promoters that came up with some really wild things that could be replicated today, I think, and it would be a lot of fun. So if you're out there listening and your job is to bring excitement into your town, this may be a place for you to get a few ideas.
I would love to see some local politicians try to go up a greased pole. Would.
Maybe we could schedule one of those.
Yeah, I'd pay for that.
Well, because there's so many things that went on in this town. I mean, you had a lot of promoters that were bringing, as troops came through, they made a stop in Statesville. It was a stop along the way for acting groups and singers and all kinds of people.
Yeah, sure was.
I thank you for doing this book, because you have given Statesville a real gift. And I want to say one thing about, you was talking about your writing, that it is, I think, much more accessible to people than writing from a erudite historian point of view. That you have made it so that you can just open this thing any place and go, Casey Jones struck by car. You and start from there, and it just kind of pulls you in that way. And the pictures also help, because they give your imagination something to go from.
Well, even more than that is proof that anybody, if you have something to say, you can write a book, and because Redhawk Publishing at Catawba Valley Technical College will take you by the hand. They will lead you. They will help you. Richard and Robert and Patty, I just can't thank y'all enough for all that you've done.
Oh, we're very honored to do it. It was a lot of fun. Like I say, there's been a lot of projects we've done that haven't been fun, but this is one that was actually so well done and so much done for us that it was a joy to do. And again, what a piece of product it is. There's nothing in our catalog like it. So we're very, very happy to have it.
And we can tell you're a history guy, because you referred to us by our old name, Catawba Valley Technical College.
Oh, I did. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
I'm old.
Sometimes those names hang on. We
call me whatever you want to call me, but don't call me late for supper.
Hey, I had to Google what a podcast was.
Sometimes we don't want to, but things change, and
Right.
you can see that in the sweep of this book as it goes from one, and you've got some of them by decades. Go from
Yeah.
one decade to the next of kind of how fleeting this current life is, because it's going to change. Yeah.
That's for sure.
And again, for those of you listening to RedPubPod, the book is available from Steve himself at his center in Statesville.
Go there.
Also, go there, because you're going to want to pick up the book, and you're going to want to look at the stuff that he's got in there. He doesn't call it a museum, but it's got a very museum feel to it. And if you are too far away or you don't want to get out, redhawkpublications.com, look under new arrivals, new releases, and you'll find the book. It is free shipping. It's a $40 book, full color throughout, and we look forward to shipping it to you. We ship daily.
And if you're looking for an adventure, I would
you go.
advise you to get the book, order it online, go get it, read it, and then go to Statesville and search out some of these places because they're really going to pique your interest. It's called In the Shadow of the Clock, The History of the Square, Statesville, North Carolina, 1790 to 1990. Dr. Steve Hill. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
On RedPubPod. Can you say that?
Red, not real fast. Red.
RedPubPod.
Red
Pub
Pub
Pod.
Pod.
Okay.
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
From the plush welded studios at Catawba Valley Community College, we bid you adieu.
Farewell. This has been
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod. Can you say that?
Red, not real fast.
A podcast. RedPubPod from Redhawk Publications.
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
Red.